Hey boys and girls, welcome to OHC Kids. I hope you're ready to learn something new. We're starting a new section with 5 new stories, and I thought since we're starting something new, maybe you would like to learn how to do something new too. How would you like to learn how to juggle in today's video? We can juggle some medium things, we can juggle some small things, maybe we can juggle some really big things. But before we get into that, let's talk about the big picture question, which is the question and answer that kind of covers all 5 of our upcoming lessons. Our big picture question for this section is, what will happen for all Christians in the future? And the answer to our big picture question is this. One day, all Christians will see Jesus in His glory and live with Him forever. Wow, that sounds amazing. That's what the gospel is all about. That's sort of the end result of living a life for Jesus and believing in Him. So we can learn more about that, and so be listening for that as we talk about all the stories for these next 5 weeks coming up. So I hope you've got something ready, and here we go. Here is step number 1 for learning how to juggle is this. First of all, boys and girls, please pardon this interruption of your regularly scheduled programming for some breaking news that we're bringing to you right now. We have one of our reporters on location at the courthouse where we anxiously await the news of some of these latest developments in the trial of one of the most famous apostles, one of the most famous people that have preached about Jesus. And that is, of course, Paul. I believe we're checking in with our reporter on site. What information do you have for us today? Yes, we are here live at the courthouse, and we've just had some interesting revelations regarding the trial of Paul. And we've heard from different governors. We've also heard from the king himself, King Agrippa. But perhaps it would be informative for our viewers to get an update for what's been happening over the last 2 years in this extremely long trial for Paul. Okay, thank you for that update. And yes, it would be a good idea to have a short recap of what has happened over these past 2 years. Very unexpected that Paul is still in prison, but he is. You all remember, we reported this a while back, that Paul, when he returned to Jerusalem after his long missionary journey, after he returned, he went to the temple to worship, as he usually does, and he knew that he was going to be found by the Jewish leaders and arrested. And that's exactly what happened. And we remember that the Roman guards came in and they took Paul, they put him in jail. And there was a plot to have Paul released, but a group of men who disagreed with Paul, they were planning to kill Paul. And our undercover investigation found out information about that too. But then, we all remember, we reported on this a few weeks ago, that during the middle of the night, there were about 470 Roman soldiers. Some of them were on horses, some of them were carrying spears, but they escorted Paul out of the city of Jerusalem during the night so that those men could not attack Paul and kill him. They took Paul to the city of Caesarea, and he was going to have a trial under Governor Felix. And we expected the trial to happen very soon, and it did. After just a few days, from Jerusalem came the high priest and some of the Jewish leaders and also a lawyer. They went to Caesarea and they held a trial. And they were mentioning things, and this all happened about 2 years ago. They were accusing Paul of being a troublemaker and of starting riots and of causing all sorts of trouble in the city. And Paul, when he was given a chance to speak, he told everyone, including Felix, he said that it is true that 12 days ago I was arrested in the temple courts area. But then Paul, he told them that he wasn't rioting. He wasn't causing any arguments with people. In fact, it was the Jewish leaders who showed up and started accusing him of things and caused a big upset area. And that's what had Paul taken away into jail. Well, Paul testified, Felix heard this,
and the Jewish leaders testified, and Felix finally said that was enough. And Governor Felix stopped the trial, and he said, we're going to hold Paul in jail until I decide what to do with him. Well, it was at this point, and this was about over a period of 2 years, Felix kept Paul in jail. And originally, Felix and his wife Drusilla, they met with Paul. Felix was interested in Paul, and he wanted to find out what was happening. And Felix met with Paul, and he asked Paul about what he was teaching. And Paul explained to him everything about how God taught self-control and righteousness, and about how the prophets and the scriptures all point to a coming judgment for evildoers. Well, at the sound of this, Felix became afraid, and he wanted to stop the conversation. So he told Paul to stop talking. So Felix and his wife Drusilla, they left. They sent Paul back to the jail, and Felix arranged for Paul to stay in jail and to be guarded by the centurions, but he allowed Paul to have visitors and to have friends. So Paul's friends could come and could take care of Paul while he was still there in jail. And this continued for 2 years. And then Felix, at the end of that 2 years, was no longer the governor. But instead of releasing Paul, Felix decided to keep Paul in prison as a favor to those Jewish leaders, because Felix knew that he could get some points by keeping Paul in jail, and he could make the Jewish leaders happy. Well, the next governor to come along was Governor Festus. And can you give us an update about Governor Festus and about what was happening with him?
All right, so regarding Festus, Governor Festus, shortly after he became governor, he left Caesarea and he went up to Jerusalem, where he met with the Jewish leaders. And he was there after about 3 days. He went up there and met with them. And at that point, the Jewish leaders came to Festus and they accused Paul of some very serious things. So after about 8 to 10 days, they all came back with Festus, and they returned to Caesarea. And in Caesarea, the Jews, again, they were accusing Paul of some very, very serious crimes, but they didn't have any proof for it. So finally, Festus brought out Paul, and they had a trial. So Paul was answering the accusations of those Jewish leaders, and Paul testified. He said he's done nothing wrong against the Jewish law. He's done nothing wrong against the Jewish temple, and he certainly had done nothing wrong against the Roman law or against Caesar, against, the Roman government. So he hadn't broken any of those laws. So Paul was saying, hey, I've done nothing wrong here. Well, Governor Festus then asked Paul if he would be willing to go back to Jerusalem and to stand a trial before the Jews there. Well, at that point, we think that Paul understood what was happening, because there were some rumors about maybe there was going to be someone that was going to kill him again. So Paul said, you know what, I'm already here in the court of Caesar, so if I'm found not guilty, nobody has the right to hand me back over to those Jewish leaders, because, things might not go well. So Paul said, and this was a stunning development, he said he appeals to Caesar. So Paul appealed to Caesar, and he wanted to have his case taken all the way back up to the highest court in the land. And you know what? Governor Festus said, okay, Paul, if you want to do that, off you go. We will send you all the way up to Rome, in the city of Rome, and we'll send you to the court of Caesar.
Wow, that was a smart move, perhaps, that Paul made. He knew the law, and he knew that as a Roman citizen, he had the legal right to ask to go see Caesar, the emperor, the ultimate judge over everything. And he was in the faraway city of Rome. So Paul perhaps suspected that something was going to happen to him if he was sent back to Jerusalem, where the Jewish leaders were. And we don't know for certain if Paul found out again about a plot to kill him, but he knew that there was probably good things would not happen if he were handed back over to the Jewish leaders. So that's interesting. So Paul made an appeal to Caesar, which meant he wanted to go take his trial all the way up to the highest court in the land, and that will be to the emperor himself, to Caesar, for him to hear. And we also understand at this point is when the king of the area of Caesarea, the king of that surrounding area, King Agrippa, and his wife Bernice, they were coming into town to visit with the new governor Festus. And that was a traditional thing that they did. And Festus was talking to King Agrippa, and they were talking about Paul, and King Agrippa wanted to hear from this man Paul. We understand that when Paul was brought in to speak to King Agrippa and Governor Festus and King Agrippa's wife Bernice and many other people were there, tell us a little bit, what happened at this trial today? What was the outcome, and what did Paul say?
All right, so that's a good question. Well, to recap the testimony that happened here, first of all, King Agrippa and Bernice, when they came into the courtroom, it was an amazing display, lots of pomp and circumstance. All the official people were here. There were some very high-ranking military officers, very important men of the city were here, and Festus finally got to the point where he was going to ask Paul questions. So he brought Paul forward, and Festus was talking to the court. And Festus, it sounds like they're dismissing now. Governor Festus addressed the crowd, and Festus said, you know, the Jews had asked him to seek the death penalty for Paul, even though Festus said he couldn't find anything wrong that Paul had done, certainly nothing worthy of death. So he didn't know what to write in a letter to Caesar, because Paul had appealed to Caesar, and Festus didn't know what to write to Caesar to tell him how to try Paul. So he hoped that he could present his case to King Agrippa, and maybe King Agrippa will be able to help out. Well, Paul then started speaking, and Paul started describing everything that he had gone through. Paul described how he had been a faithful Jewish leader, how he had been a Pharisee, how he had kept every single point of the law, how he never broke the Jewish law, and how he even thought that Christians deserved to be arrested. He thought that Christians were a cult, that they weren't following God the true way. But then he described to the court how he met Jesus on the road to Damascus, how when that blinding light came, that Jesus revealed himself and told Paul that he had a plan for Paul. And from that moment on, Paul said he was obeying God. He understood that Jesus was the true Messiah, and that Jesus had come, and by dying on the cross and taking away our sin, and when Jesus was resurrected to new life, that showed that Jesus was truly the Son of God, and that God has a plan for all of us to love him and to be reunited with him forever. Well, at this point, when Paul mentioned about Jesus being resurrected and about all of us having life again, Festus interrupted. And I wrote some notes here for what Festus described to Paul. So we were in the courtroom and we wrote a few things down here. Festus said, quote, "You're out of your mind, Paul." But then Paul responded, he said, "I'm not insane, most excellent Festus. I'm saying what's true and reasonable, and I believe that King Agrippa understands this." Well, at that point, it was a little bit funny because King Agrippa spoke up and he asked Paul, he said, "Paul, in this short time, do you think that you too can make me be a Christian?" Well, Paul then concluded with these words. He said, "Whether it takes a short time or a long time, I pray to God that you and everyone in this courtroom listening to me will understand and will believe." Well, at that point, Agrippa and his wife Bernice and Festus, they all rose and they left the courtroom, and the courtroom was essentially done. But we overheard them speaking in the hallway, and King Agrippa spoke to Festus, and King Agrippa said that if Paul had not requested an appeal to Caesar, that he could have been released, because they all said that Paul had done nothing deserving of death. In fact, he had done nothing deserving of imprisonment. So Agrippa told Festus, if Paul hadn't requested to go all the way up to Rome to see Caesar and to continue the trial there, they could have let Paul go even at that point.
I see. So are you telling us that Paul would have been released by King Agrippa, but he had requested that his trial continue to see the emperor, to see Caesar? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is exactly right.
Wow, that is just amazing. You know, Paul was willing to do hard things to share the gospel. That's kind of what this whole trial has been about, I guess, about his willingness to do that. You know what? In fact, we have some papers here. We've gone through some of the. We got a copy of one of the letters that Paul had written to some of his other believers. In fact, this it kind of sounds like what he's written to the people in the city of Philippi. We're going to be talking about this probably in the days ahead. But he wrote a letter to the people in Philippi, and it's actually in the first chapter of what he wrote. And in the very beginning, in chapter 1, verse 6 of Philippians, we have this was something that we maybe should all remember. Paul wrote that, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Wow. Paul is really confident in what God has promised, and the fact that he's being empowered by the Holy Spirit and the Lord Jesus giving him this power to go through all these trials. And Paul is just an amazing example for us to follow. And I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about him. Boys and girls, don't worry, we're going to continue covering this trial, and we're going to continue following Paul, and we'll see exactly what happens to him, and we'll see what adventures await him, and what's going to happen to him in prison, and if he does make it to Rome. But we'll report all these things to you at the next opportunity. We'll break in with breaking news the next time something happens. So I believe that's all that we have for today. Do you have anything else to add to today's story?
No, I believe that's everything here today from the court. It's been a pleasure to report to you what's been happening.
All right then. Well, we thank you for being diligent and for you doing hard work and being out there on location and reporting. And we will see everyone next time. And I guess now we can take everyone back to your regularly scheduled program. Have a great day, everyone. Oh, wow, we did it. Amazing. You guys were great. You guys learned how to do all this stuff today? Wow, absolutely amazing. We learned how to juggle even 6 different things. And wow, man, I'm just so glad you could be a part of this video today. That was so much fun. Well, it was also fun learning about what Paul was going through too. And we're going to come back next week. We're going to learn something new about what Paul does. And I know that you will be able to put into practice some of the things that we learned, even in today, how Paul endured many different hardships, so that he could teach the gospel. He was willing to do hard things. And we're going to see some more difficult things that Paul does. So I hope you come back next week. We're going to have more fun stuff to do. Until then, I will see you later. And now, boys and girls, but before we get into the juggling, let's talk about the big picture question. And let's also turn off the air conditioner so it doesn't make a noise. How about we talk about the big picture question? This is the question that sort of is applicable to the whole story of all of these.